We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio. And ahead of us, we have a special two-part Talking Liberty segment for you, discussing the legal and constitutional aspect of the leaked opinion that looks to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, what does it mean? What's the spin? And what's the reality? As ever, we have with us Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, constitutional attorney, and host of the always inspiring Uprising podcast, Mr. Scott DeCosenza, Esquire. Thanks for being here, Scott.
My pleasure, Mark.
So, Scott, with the leaking of this opinion by somebody at the Supreme Court from Justice Alito.
Maybe, right.
Perhaps.
We presume.
This has really upset the entire apple cart. Now, obviously, there's the political aspects, the constitutional aspects, but really I want to dive first into the legal aspects of this. So this leak said that the abortion decisions will now go to the states and allow them to make their own laws. How does this impact the current law, the current standing of Roe v. Wade, and presumed by extension Casey versus Planned Parenthood?
So if this draft opinion, which is a draft opinion by those in the majority, so it's would be the controlling law if it was enacted fundamentally unaltered, which I expect it will be, by the way, then Roe v. Wade is completely and totally overturned, as is its legacy, namely the Planned Parenthood v. Casey case. And so it would be like Roe never existed. And so therefore we would revert back to what the law it was, or the situation regarding abortion law prior to 1973's Roe, which is that states may enact criminal penalties on abortion and abortionists. And that would be the state of the law. So there may be states like Massachusetts or New Jersey or California that allow nearly unfettered access to abortion, and states like Oklahoma or Texas that might crack down on it and make it criminally prohibited to perform or seek an abortion.
Okay, so what are the states doing right now to prepare for this? Presumably they are doing something.
Well, there are 13 states that have trigger laws in place that already criminalize abortion if it's allowed to be criminalized, right? So they kind of say, if this is constitutional, then it's illegal. And so the very second that opinion would be published, meaning if the Supreme Court publishes the leaked opinion or a variant of it that's substantially similar as their opinion in Dobbs, the case, then those prohibitions go into effect immediately, and full stop for any abortions in that state, for instance, if that's what the law had read. Apparently there are another 13 states that are basically fixing to enact these sort of trigger laws, and so that would be 26 obviously, where abortion would be prohibited in short order after the opinion came down. Again, this is all presuming that opinion stays substantially unaltered when it's issued.
Okay, now let's talk briefly about Roe v. Wade itself. So I've read a lot of criticism of the original Roe v. Wade decision. And this is even from people who are on the pro-choice side, saying that Roe was bad law. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, it's a garbage decision, I would say. And I think that there's a lot of misreporting out there, or I don't know what the exact word would be for it, but there is a wide and
disinformation.
Broad...
It'll be passed on to the Disinformation Governance Board soon enough, I'm sure.
The thing is, there is a huge backlash against what I think is the result from this case. If it actually issues forward
as
unaltered, not Roe itself being overturned, and so much of the reporting on the case focuses on people being upset that Roe is overturned, but I don't think they are upset that Roe is overturned. And maybe this is an inside baseball kind of lawyer answer, but they're upset that the result of Roe being overturned means that there is a decrease in access to abortion services, or putting it mildly, of course, obviously in certain states where it's criminally prohibited, but they don't care that Roe was overturned. So if the Supreme Court said we're overturning Roe, but there is a right to an abortion found in some other place in the Constitution, presumably these folks would be just as happy to keep their abortion access rights. And Justice Alito spends a great deal of time in his, I believe it's like a 67-ish, 60-some page opinion that he wrote, laying out the reasons why Roe is a garbage opinion. It relies on false statistics, for instance, about abortions and abortion law, that basically there was a fraud committed upon the court in 73 when some of the briefing papers were submitted. And also just a kind of in Planned Parenthood v. Casey, for instance, just an absolute sop to stare decisis and public perception. And Alito goes into both of those in his analysis and discusses why that deference to Roe was too great, and also why the court needs to not worry about public opinion and instead worry about the Constitution more so.
Well, that's something we'll get back to, is the public opinion side of this. But another criticism I've heard of the apparent decision by the Supreme Court in this particular case is that they're being accused of legislating from the bench. Now, my understanding of this obviously is from fairly layman's terms, but it was my understanding that Roe v. Wade was technically legislating from the bench anyway, because there's not been anything codified into law.
Yeah, legislating from the bench is a charge that people on the left and people on the right make when they get a case that they don't agree with the result in, chiefly, and that is not particularly narrow. So the broader in scope that an opinion is, the more likely they're going to get a charge of legislating from the bench. I don't see it in this case. I'm one of those people who is pro-choice and also thinks that Roe is a garbage opinion. So there's sadly less and less room for nuance in our politics with every passing year, it seems like. But that's an opinion that sort of doesn't make anybody happy, But it's true for me, which is that I think that Roe v. Wade should have been overturned. I think it was bad law when it was issued for, all the reasons that Justice Alito says. I think his opinion is great. And also, I think that there can be found a legal right to abortion within the Constitution without the manipulations of the law that I saw in the Roe v. Wade opinion.
Okay, let's get back to the justices in the leak, and we talk about pressure on judges. Now, there's a lot of speculation, and I think it's quite warranted in this particular case that the document was leaked in order to create a certain amount of pressure on the justices before a final opinion is released. Does that proposition hold any water, do you think?
Well, it may have been leaked for that purpose, and it's fun to speculate. I'm happy to do so. But let's be clear that this is speculation. We don't know. There's a case to think that this was done by a liberal justice for various reasons. Could be to encourage the passage of this federal legislation regarding Roe before the midterms, to help Democrats in the midterms by taking the focus off the devastation of our economy, take
the focus off literally every single other thing that's happening in the country today.
Right. There's all kinds. So there's several reasons why that may be the case, but there's also a case for a justice in the conservative camp to have leaked it in order to, the sort of hypothesis there is that one of the five in the majority is getting cold feet about overturning Roe. This was a February, a draft that was written in February. And so we don't know where things have gone since then in terms of, the strength of the sort of coalition, for lack of a better term, to vote this way. And the supposition would be like, oh, somebody's getting cold feet. If we leak this, then they'll sort of be locked in because they won't want to be seen as reacting to public opinion rather than their own independent judgment. So
just to reiterate, this is all speculative here that we're talking about. And
well,
I
absolutely,
think
it's not speculative that these may be the reasons why. There are only so many motivations that make sense for the leaking, and those are, I think, two of the best cases.
Okay, and there's a thing about the confidentiality of the court. Now, this is not just true of the Supreme Court, but true of of every court and every legal chamber across the land. There's the need for confidentiality.
The court cannot function without confidentiality because, of course, one of the things that the court does is deliberate the fate of these cases, and those deliberations cannot exist without confidentiality surrounding them. You'll get, instead of the best outcome and analysis, you'll get this other thing, which we don't want, which is that judges won't talk to each other, especially across sort of ideological lines. And we need the best minds that we can get on the court, and their best product, which comes from a deliberative process and arguing back and forth. And if they can't trust each other to keep their mouths shut about what happens in an argument, and I use the term in the sense of making legal arguments to one another about how a case should resolve, the court really cannot function. So I think that what we're likely to see, Mark, is some kind of more militaristic control over information with version numbers and retina scans and that sort of thing, with maybe not exactly that, but you get the idea. A further lockdown of who has access to this information. Not that it was a wide circle before, but I think it'll be even more controlled.
We're here talking liberty with Scott D. Cosenza on the legal fallout of the SCOTUS leak, the constitutionality of Roe v. Wade, and much more. After this short break, we'll be back with Scott to dig even deeper into the ruling, what it presages, and what the government's next steps might be in either retaliating against the decision or looking for a legal workaround. Stay tuned to find out more as we continue our Roe v. Wade special edition here on Liberty Nation Radio. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.